Let's first unpack what learning is. And you provide the definition in the book of learning is the acquisition of knowledge or skills and having them readily available from memory so you can make decisions. But it comprises of three parts: encoding, consolidation, and retrieval. Perhaps you can elaborate on each one of those processes to give people more insight into what learning really is. And let's start with encoding.
Encoding is simply initial acquisition of information. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're hearing our sentences, you're encoding them briefly, then they'll consolidate, and then the question is, can you retrieve them later on? So encoding is just initial acquisition, the way cognitive psychologists talk.
So it's just a process, right, of converting sensory perceptions into meaningful representations in the brain, and it's still not perfectly understood. How about consolidation, the second part?
Well, consolidation involves the process by which there are biological changes in the brain. And these biological changes have to do with neurons creating new connections with other neurons. And these systems of neuronal connections are what ultimately represent what we've learned. And initially, these activations might be simply activations of neurons among each other, the electrical chemical activations. But then consolidation takes these activations, and when they're activated frequently enough, starts to connect new synapses, build new synapses. So that from a biological perspective, that's what most people think about in terms of consolidation.
So this process of strengthening these mental representations for long-term memory leads to consolidation, which then the third part is retrieval. And retrieval is, there's a lot of things that go into this, but perhaps just provide a brief explanation of what that is and how effective it can be if used with the right learning techniques.
Well, we have to speak of memory traces so that our encoding is creating memory traces that consolidate. And then the question is, the issue in retrieval is, can we get back to that? There are many experiences that we have in life that consolidate for a brief period of time, and we can remember them. Like you can remember the events you did yesterday pretty well. In a month, you can't. So those, have consolidated because you can remember them, say, overnight, but retrieving them much later is quite difficult, picking out one day from the other, say. And so retrieval is the act of bringing back into consciousness experiences that you had before. And they might be accurate, they might be somewhat accurate, and so forth and so on.
And having those effective retrieval cues is an aspect of learning that often goes overlooked. The task is more than committing knowledge to memory. It's being able to retrieve it when you need it. It's just as important. And that's really a lot about adult learning science, is being able to retrieve it in the proper context to be able to use that information